So there's something that you're very passionate about, and I am, which is the calorie model. And to define it really quickly, I want to make sure we're aligned. It's this weight loss or gain is calories in versus calories out. You just burn or consume more than your body needs to lose or gain weight. It's that easy. So if you want to lose weight, just eat less. What do you think?
Mm, yeah, I was indoctrinated into that way of thinking when I was in school, and I knew very early on that it was a highly incomplete and misleading model. Fast forward, 15 years later, it still seems like it is the kind of popular paradigm, and that's because people like hard science and like math, and with technology, you can get a lot of data on calories. So people tend to focus on it as the top of the top. And I guess if I were to push back on the calorie model, I would push back on it because of my interest in mental health. It really reduces nutrition to being solely a vanity focused endeavor. And if someone is, a believer in the calorie model, they might choose, a lower calorie version of something that is nowhere near as nutritious as the higher calorie version. So it just lands on me as diet culture energy, but there's a lot of mechanisms in terms of, gut bacteria, hormones, stress, other, even digestive disorders that challenge this calorie model as a whole. And I think people are coming around to say there's more to it. But if you look on social media, especially in the fitness world, it tends to be sort of the thing that people double click on the most.
It doesn't account for your age, your muscle mass, your fat mass, the fact that you're in menopause, your hormones, the past dieting, where your metabolism's at now. Just so many things that also are influencing calories out and calories in. If you eat less calories, your metabolism taps the brakes and starts to slow. That doesn't match the calories in versus calories out model very well at all.
When I introduce people to don't count your calories, count your blessings, let's look at the different food group distribution and count your colors. Let's try to get all the colors of the rainbow. I think that certain calorie calculating apps and softwares do try to account for all these other factors. But again, there's so much more to nutrition than body fat manipulation and weight management. And that's probably why I don't love the calorie model. It's not going to be the thing that's going to move them into the new chapter.
100%. And I don't want to imply that calories don't matter at all. I mean, how do you talk to people about calories?
I don't offer it as a framework because it does seem that if someone is focused on that, they might miss all the other parts of the picture. It's like buying a car based on you really like the tires. It's not that I would like tell someone to ignore it. I would just focus on filling in the missing gaps.
So I really want to learn from you about how we approach ultra processed foods, and that might be additives, colors, fillers, and how that overlaps with mental health conditions.
Yeah, and I know we touched on it in our first episode, and it's just worth diving back in because there's a lot of research and a lot of headlines and a lot of controversy. Some of the pushback that I hear is that, ultra processed foods aren't very well defined, and they actually are. There's so a lot of times when people are saying there's nothing wrong with ultra processed foods, they're talking about processed foods, foods that contain identifiable food groups that have been enhanced for palatability, right? Most of the food we eat is processed foods. But when we talk about ultra processed foods, we really are talking about foods that are made by a series of large scale industrial practices that involve a lot of manipulation of the food and a lot of exposure to metals and heat and packaging and plastic. And so a lot of the issues with ultra processed foods don't just come from the ingredients themselves, but from the loss of nutrients that occur during processing. And the other part that I really want to emphasize is most people, when they think of ultra processed foods and these sort of current efforts to quote unquote demonize them, they go to immediately cookies, cakes, snacks, etc. But ultra processed foods also includes all these predatory diet foods, right? The keto breads and the no sugar jellos and the fat-free salad dressings, and there's just a lot of foods that have been created based on the calorie framework that are ultra processed to appeal to people that are susceptible to dieting, that are very much filled with artificial sweeteners, colors, and a lot of things that don't actually support health. And so, a stand that I've taken against ultra processed foods is also a stand against diet culture, against foods that have really been marketed to vulnerable populations as being health promoting, right? They're able to put this health halo on it and say things like low calorie, fat free. Ultra processed foods to me carries energy of sometimes um, deceit or corporate greed, and I think that that's also worth saying out loud, that the efforts toward challenging ultra processed foods isn't challenging people. It's not challenging someone that's on a limited budget that needs to make it work in their life. It is challenging the system that makes these foods so cheap that other food purveyors can't compete. I think that's the public health part of the picture. Yeah, my interest in ultra processed foods really skyrocketed during my PhD in public health when thinking about the food environment and food swamps, right? Not just food deserts, but areas where these are, made so accessible, reduce negative affect, and, make it so that it becomes the norm. It's the norm. More than half of the calories consumed in the US are ultra processed foods. I've given up on biohacking and trying to optimize my health. You do it for 10 years and then you're like, I just want to live my life. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm not against them for people. I do have bones to pick with ultra processed foods in the context of uh, institutions and thinking about food as a potential unspoken tool of oppression for marginalized groups.